Hello, writers. Come write with me. My name is Michaela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my channel, Write with Michaela. I'm very excited to have you here on my channel, so don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. If you're writing with me and you wish to exchange chapters, then send your chapter with written permission to writewithmichaela@gmail.com. I will post the email address at the end of the video and in the description below. I'm looking forward to reading your chapters. And if you want to write with me, then just send to the email address and ask for the shared plot. And then I can send you the shared plot for this story. All chapters are writing prompts read on the channel, where they are mine or another writer's work or copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. The story is PG-13, so if you're under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. The story is in its rough draft stage, just as the last stories we've heard. The title of the story is Elloni's Pride, and today we are reading chapter 24 out of book 3. If you would like to read along, then send to the email I stated earlier and request a PDF of the chapter. Make sure you are specific. Now let's start. Elloni's Pride, Book 3, Gaining Freedom, Chapter 24, The Cost of Battle. King Fate and all the people that were participating in the morning's battle lifted off several at a time. Trenton was torn. He wanted to stay with Aldemnia because it seemed she was in labor, but she had told him to go and fight. And all the mothers that were with Aldemnia and that were helping told him they would do everything they could. So Trenton headed out to be with the Linkers. Kosher, Kala, and Sir Bradley noticed how downcast Trenton looked, but they didn't say anything. Kosher just knew he was glad he wasn't in Trenton's shoes. King Maltelron Damontade's troops had stopped in Kalmesh's kingdom. It was a kingdom they knew about, but most of them were surprised at the damage. The small group had already flown north, knew about the cave, so the king and several others had headed around to the caves. Rashkalf had wanted to check and redress the king's wounds, and found it was doing as well as anyone could expect. It would take a long time to heal, since it was such a deep wound, but it should heal. The majority of the troops and all their dragons did not fit in the caves, and they had camped outside. This morning in the dawn, they mounted their dragons, and they hoped to be to King Damontade's brother's kingdom by mid-afternoon. King Fate-Right's people were in position and ready to drop their invisibility and sound their short note on their horn, when several became invisible among them. King Damontade's soldiers saw the invisible people come into sight, and they sounded a long note on their horn. King Damontade's soldiers scrambled to mount their dragons. Several dragons already had gear on, since King Damantade had told them to get dragons ready with each shift change, and then when the shift rested, those dragons could rest as well. Still, it was only 20 dragons, and King Fate-Right seemed to have a lot of troops. So the rest of the dragon rider soldiers rushed to get their gear on their dragons. Kelgor's group heard the horn, and they sped up some, but not enough to overexert themselves, because they wanted to participate in the battle. Kelgor reminded them, if they remembered a family member's name, then to think with that dragon not to take any more potions. The dragons understood. Valsaroth had spoken with his Linkers yesterday, and he had told them about the bizarre tactics that these Linkers used. He told them to watch and learn, and if they needed charms, they could think with Kala. Volaroth had disputed his father, said they couldn't all think with the maiden. So he got Kosher and introduced many of their Linkers to the Linkers of the mountains. The Linkers in the mountains agreed to think with the new Linkers, and they gave several charms before they had gone to bed for the night. This morning many checked their words before they lifted off. Valsaroth knew of the pairing, but he didn't know or think that different Linkers might give different charms. In many ways he was like King Fate-Right, and he watched the battle and fought, and he was surprised at what his linkers were doing. But none seemed to enlarge their dragons. The charm seemed to startle them when the other linkers used it. Broman had learned many names, and he learned the breath of many, so he was more flying around and instructing dragons on where to use their breath. Hagar kept them out of reach of the enemy, and he used his fire breath often with the word Vitr-Mar. King Damantade had instructed his soldiers that someone needed to kill Browser and bring him Browser's head. He felt that Browser was responsible for all the new tricks the linkers were using. So once he was aloft in the air and he spotted Browser, he commanded all his soldiers near him to attack Browser. 7 soldiers near King Damantade headed towards Browser, and then as more saw them, they too headed towards Browser. Several linkers noticed. Kala thought to Browser to shrink, drop lower, and go invisible. Browser saw all the soldiers coming for him, but he followed the instructions. Kala thought to Libya to send in Cremenia and her fire breath, and to have Cremenia enlarge herself beforehand. No one knew what Kala planned, but she had thought instructions to several, including to Trenton, to name the dragons beneath the dome and make them small and chain them to the ground. Trenton was thinking, what dome? When suddenly an extra-large wooden dome appeared in the air, and it contained 12 of the dragons that were heading for Browser. Browser was looking above himself, and Dronsnide was flying very slowly. So he thought with Huminar, the tailor matched with him if Huminar could zoom them. Huminar quickly agreed. Time practically froze for several seconds, and several people on both sides veered away from the dome. But Cremenia flew to it as she was saying the charm to enlarge herself. She breathed her fire, and the entire dome caught on fire. Then she veered away and became normal size. Zoom more! Yelled Browser as he directed Dronside to sink even lower. He didn't think he was going to make it, but Huminar zoomed again, and Browser and Dronside could feel the wind of the falling dome. After they were out, Browser became visible and normal size. He looked over his shoulder at the burning dome. Man, we were almost trapped in there. Everyone glanced around to see what was next, when several spotted Kelgor's group of 24 dragons. Broman was cheering for Cremenia and all the dragons, and now he cheered for the group flying in to join them. But only Broman was sure the riderless dragons with black on their backs were on their side. Suddenly, Lydia received, Cycle 1, Cycle 1! Lydia directed Fracas to do the maneuver, but as he turned, another enemy was flying at them. Fracas turned to avoid the second enemy, and Lydia fell from her dragon. Libya directed Elloni to fly so she could catch her sister like she had done 6 years ago. So Elloni started flying. Libya's falling abhorred Kala and Kosher, and they couldn't think of any spells. Browser finally remembered the word for rope, and he set a rope charm to form a net beneath Libya. But before Libya dropped in the net, another enemy slashed at her and sliced her from her shoulder on one side down to the hip on the other. Lydia cried out in pain for a few minutes. Fracas was very angry, so he breathed a breath with the word volley free, and a huge mound of dirt and rocks dropped down on the soldier that had slashed Lydia. Volderat thought to Libya, get your sister and use the haze. Take her to Liberling. He can stitch her up and apply herbs. Maybe the little people can help you get her. Libya's mind was just screaming, no, no, no. But Bitsy thought to her that she could retrieve Lydia. She thought she would zoom down and back up, so Libya should start the haze charm. Libya still wasn't thinking for herself, but she started the haze charm, and she would finish it when Bitsy returned to her. King Fate-Right's group all paused momentarily, and all knew that Lydia's sibling would need more protection. Lydia's siblings would need more protection, at least in the short term, until they could focus back on the battle. Sir Bradley had flown in closer to Kala already. Brahman was trying to get Hagar to get closer to Elloni, but then Elloni flew into the haze and was gone. The enemy soldiers paused when Elloni disappeared, especially those closer to her, because they could feel no wind from the dragon at all. They felt if the dragon was invisible, then they could still sense it. King Fate-Right motioned to his commanders to strike. They did. Cinder's group was actually doing better in this battle than they had in the 3 previous battles, and they knew the motions King Fate-Right made, so they also started striking the enemies immediately around them. Kala looked at Sir Bradley, and he shouted to her that Libya took Lydia home, so hopefully she could get the help she needed. Kala shouted back, "I can't lose my sister. I already lost my paw." Sir Bradley motioned with his head and said, "Then let's finish this." Kala pushed back her tears and focused on the battle. Trenton had flown in near Kosher. He didn't have words to give, but he remembered when people died in the village, he and his pa would busy themselves with the burial, which was hard labor. So he just shouted some ideas of fighting side by side and striking the same soldiers from the different sides. Kosher felt almost numb, but Minnick was sending him thoughts that echoed what Trenton was saying, so Kosher just nodded his head slightly. Then Kilgore's group arrived, and they started helping. King Fate-Right's soldiers didn't know what to expect of the dragons, but they took their opportunities. Brahman was cheering in his heart that the riderless dragons were helping them. He didn't know he didn't know what he would say to Libya when he saw her again, but he hoped beyond hope that somehow, some way, her twin would survive. Brahman could only think on the extra thoughts for a few seconds because he had dragons to help master themselves and the charms they could say. King Fate-Right felt that the number of extra linkers was helping him, but he didn't want to exhaust his people, so he planned on having everyone turn invisible in an hour or so. He thought the plan to Jarvis, and Jarvis would monitor the time for him. Libya and Elloni came out of the haze and landed quickly. Bitsy put Lydia in Libya's hands. "Keep her small, please," asked Libya, and she called out, "I need Liberling. Someone told me he could help my sister." Liberling was near in the garden, and he rushed over. He had Libya bring her sister to their quarters, and he would start sewing right away. Liberling started touching his pouches to make sure he had all the ones he needed. When they got to Libya's family chamber, none of Libya's family were there, but Joseph's family was, and they realized the situation and brought over cloth to apply pressure. Once Libya laid Lydia on the bed, Bitsy released her charm. Liberling shook his head. The linkers didn't wear the metal armor like the soldiers, especially not the girls, because the armor was too heavy for them. Soltera, Joseph's niece, quickly wrapped her arm around Libya and guided her out of the chamber. Soltera didn't want to give false hope, but she told Libya that Liberling could work better without her standing over him and worrying. Libya nodded, and then part way down the hall, she sat against the tunnel wall and pulled Rosalie out of her pocket, and she just cried into Rosalie's fur. Even with all the ceremonies and all the graves they dug in the last several days or week, Libya still never thought she would be without her twin. Sylvie was coming down the hall because they had finished delivering Aldemnia's baby girl. The baby was small, but it seemed like the baby would make it. Sylvie stopped short, with her heart in her throat. Tears just started running down her face. She knew she had lost a child, but she didn't know which one. She sat down beside Libya and put her arm around Libya's shoulders. Libya leaned into her mom. Through her tears, Libya said, "I'm sorry, Ma. I'm just not strong enough like Pa wanted me to be." At that statement, Sylvie cried even more, and she pulled Libya closer. "No, dear, you're very strong. You and Elloni have done a lot. Drenacia and Manshita wouldn't have survived if you and Kala and the others hadn't helped them." Sylvie just cried with Libya in her arms, and she could not bring herself to ask which child had died. In a way, it didn't matter which one, because she loved all her children. But at the same time, she hoped it was only one. With Libya here, she knew she had Kosher, Kala, Lydia, and Kempton still unaccounted for. Thankfully, Thrasher and Lithia were with Hoshman's wife, Thilda, at the moment. Soon Nayli came down the hall, and she wanted to sit in Sylvie's lap. She too cried, although Nayli didn't know why. The two were crying. Jarvis let King Fate-Right know that the hour was up. They were doing well and hadn't lost anyone else. They had several injuries, but still King Fate-Right knew they needed to rest. So he started motioning to his commanders. Brumman saw the motions, and he thought with Kilgore that they were getting ready to fly away, and they would return another day. Kilgore thought he would distract the enemy soldiers. Kilgore worked well with Bunkle, and he and the extra-large dragon grew in size and breathed fire at the enemy. Only Bunkle's breath spewed dirt and rocks. Kilgore paused, but then he remembered, before the darkness, that his friend had earth breath. He would think with Broman later about that. Several more dragons in Kilgore's group grew large and breathed their breath, and they had fire and wind and water and earth spraying every which way. When Kilgore glanced south, which was the direction King Fate-Ride's group had flown, he didn't see them. So he thought with his pride to turn invisible and fly away. They would meet back at their current cave. Liberling came out in the hall, and he held his hat in his hands. His fingers fiddled with his hat. When Libya looked up and saw him, her heart sank, and she cried all the more. She got up and ran into the chamber. Nayli ran behind her. Sylvie got up a little slower, and she walked to Liberling and stopped. "I'm sorry, ma'am," stated Liberling. "I used every charm I knew, and I sewed her up as fast as I could, but she lost too much blood." Sylvie briefly put her hand on his shoulder as she walked to their living space. "I'm sure you did your best." As Sylvie reached the chamber, she heard Libya saying, No, you can't die. We have to fight together." And Sylvie saw it was Lydia, and the tears rolled down her face. Lydia looked peaceful, and Jaxie was telling her that they would dress her for the burial once Sylvie told them which clothes. But that wasn't something Sylvie could think on at the moment. Hoshman and Thilda entered. Sir Bradley had thought with his paw about the possibility once Sir Bradley had turned south and turned invisible. Thilda's hand clasped her husband's, but then she pulled it forwards and out of his grasp. She motioned to him. Hoshman remembered when they had lost their daughter long ago, because the soldiers had killed her because of her scar. He remembered his wife needed his support. The soldiers had also killed Sylvie's husband, Jarson, so she had no one to comfort her. Hoshman walked up behind her and laid his hands on her shoulders. Sylvie turned back. She leaned into the embrace that Hoshman was offering. Thilda went to Livia and embraced her. Nayli hugged the legs of Sylvie and Hoshman. Then Broman's parents entered and realized that Lydia was dead. Broman's ma addressed Jaxie and told her what clothes to dress the girl in, including her leather armor that the enemy had damaged. After that, she went to the cooking area and started some food cooking. She knew Sylvie had been with Aldemnia all day, and now with the news, it was just too much. Bolton, Broman's paw, didn't know what to do. So he scooped up Nayli and headed out of the chamber. He told her the troops were returning soon, and she could help put the dragons in their spaces. When King Fate-Right landed and dismounted, he saw Bolton send Nayli to him to lead his dragon inside the caverns. He knew immediately that the news was bad. He thought with Sofla to see if she had heard the news. Then he looked for Kosher and Kala and Kempton. In his mind, all three were too young to fight. But Kempton was a year older than his twin sister Lydia, and he had just started fighting with them, although he did patrol every day. He knew he hadn't really counseled with any of the families. He thought he might need to start doing that. He remembered losing his wife and how long it took him to get over it, although not many knew that because he just pushed forward with ruling the kingdom and doing what was necessary. After Sophlin got the news, she headed immediately to the chambers for Lydia's family. She remembered how she met Lydia when Lydia's symbol shone on her arm, and Lydia had been afraid that the soldiers had found her. Lydia had been naive, and that naivete was precious, and Lydia hadn't lost that innocence about her. As Sophlin arrived, so did Linda and Lima and their mother. Soon after, Kala, Kosher, and Kempton arrived. Hoshman and Thilda backed away and gave the family space. Joseph got his family to leave the chamber for now. They could come back after the ceremony. Sir Bradley was helping Broman and the boys he was using to help with the dragons, but Broman was having a hard time with Fracas. Fracas was blaming himself, and he didn't want to go in the mountains to the dragon spaces. Clefort went to help Broman with Fracas. Clefort started telling Fracas all his mistakes and asking Fracas if he would be mad at him for those things. And Fracas said no over and over. Finally, Clefort told Fracas that he wasn't mad at Fracas. He stated that he was actually mad at the soldiers that cut Lydia down. Then suddenly Fracas asked Clefort if he wanted to fight the soldiers. He told Clefort that he could fly him in battle tomorrow. Started Clefort. I haven't been trained to fight. Broman said, Fracas, did you understand what Clefort was trying to say? No one blames you. We all miss Lydia, and we wish it hadn't happened. But too many dragons flew towards you and Lydia. Lydia hadn't a chance. When they flew like that to Brosser, we all kind of expected it. And several helped Brosser, but no one helped Lydia until Brosser caught her with the net. Broman shook his head. I don't know why so many targeted her. They did to her what they had done to King Fate-Right and Brosser and some of the commanders. He shook his head again. Fracas felt a little better, but he was still falling into a deep depression. However, he let Clefort lead him to his area. Okay, writers, that is the end of chapter 24. I told myself I wouldn't cry as I read, but you saw the tears just start flowing. King Fate-Right has lost a lot of people in the battle so far, but none of them were named people. None of them were people the reader knew, so it was easier. Usually, I ask you to leave a comment, so today is the same. Leave a comment on, if you were Broman, what would you say to Libya? If you were Sir Bradley, what would you say to Kala? If you were Sophlin, would you feel that you should have spent more time with Lydia in the past few days and weeks? And leave a comment on any other person on how you think they will feel or react. Everybody has different experiences in life. Some people have lost people. Others have been friends to people that lost. Like I'm a friend to people that have lost their mom or their dad or something like that. So I have a different perspective of that than they do of actually losing the person. So leave the comments on, say, if I were so-so, I would feel blah, blah, blah. If you're a twin, then please leave that comment. How would you feel if your twin died? Especially like this. So leave those comments, build our community. Join me Tuesday for vocabulary and part 16 of A Down Soldier. Join me Friday for chapter 25 of Elloni's Pride, Gaining Freedom. This book has 27 chapters, so we have 3 more chapters, 25, 26, 27. Our next story will hopefully be ready by then, but right now it's only at like 65,000 words. And the genre is 80 to 120,000. So, I have a few thousand more to put, 20,000 more or so to put down. And we'll see if it's ready. Visit my website bymichaela.com. Read some character bios. If you read some, leave a comment on which ones you've read. And I do know that they will be changing. So if you have suggestions for changes, then send them to me, because when I go to change them, I will read what you say and see if I need to change them that way. All your comments will help us to start conversations, build our community. Keep all comments respectful. And remember that someone else's perspective will help you with your writing. We can't see every perspective. That's not being a human. We can only see, from our background, from our past, from our family upbringing, from our religion, from our socioeconomic status, from our... We have a different way to see things than somebody who is a little bit different from us. So just because you see it one way doesn't mean you're 100% right. You might be right for you. You may not be right for somebody else. So keep the comments coming and keep them respectful, and try to see it from somebody else's perspective. It's like, okay, I can kind of see that. I can't see that. Then see if you can incorporate that perspective into your writing. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and the bell, so we can continue to write together, and other people will have a higher chance of finding this video and this channel, since your likes will push the video out to a greater audience. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Michaela with Write with Michaela. Bye for now.